So, I've decided to step down from running the guild for a little while I been playing Legacy Steel and Sorcery, which has been a lot of fun. But, of course, today I got a handful of tips. Mainly for a lot of you guys out there that are just starting, and really frankly, I think it's just probably easier to explain it in terms of like what I want to get across. Which is today I'm gonna give you a lot of generic advice, but also stuff that you can take to, any number of things going into the game. Like, for starters, when you start off playing in this game, okay, think of it kind of like Lord's Bubble. It's got a lot of similarities to like a lot of strategy titles that are out there. That is to say that you've got forts, and the way that the states work are kind of like kingdoms. They're gridded out by a certain amount of territory. Everybody gets to spawn. When you start out, you only have access to like a certain amount of it, right? And over time, you'll get more and more until eventually you get this thing called they call it Castle Battle, but I mean, literally, it's the Sunfire Castle. And I mean, really, there's not a whole lot to it. I mean, you're just fighting basically for these little turrets. And the idea is when this event comes up, all you're going to do is have your alliance and maybe a handful of other alliances take over those turrets and hold the main castle. And if you want to avoid actually taking damage, then you fight for those turrets so that you don't get a constant waste of wounded troops, the people that are holding in Sunfire. That's Sunfire Castle in a nutshell. And eventually, after like a year of being in that state, you'll eventually get to something called Dragon Tyrant. And that's basically the same idea, just now you're going to go against not your state, but every other state fighting for the same capital, which is, very similar to like Battle Royale, like in Lord's Mobile. But I give you that perspective because what a lot of people don't understand coming into a game like this is, yes, there is territories. So you if you want to get like an alliance started, I mean, the basic gist is you've got to establish these little banners, and the banners give you access to what's inside. So, like, for example, if I was somebody that was starting out, you'll notice that you get these little alliance mines, right? You got to have them under the banner in order to generate that resource. So when you're starting out, you kind of need to be very strategic in the way in which you decide where you're going to place your banners. And you got to be willing to fight for it should someone else decide that they want what you have. And this is where, at least when it starts out, you can see why there's a lot of conflict because people are going to be fighting for those alliance territories and they want to establish dominance and control over whatever those territorial advantages are going to be, and this also goes not only for the actual resource nodes, but it also goes also for the actual fortresses, because the fortresses too also have rewards that, it's not exactly unique per fortress, so like what you may gain in, say, that fortress is not going to be the same thing that you gain in this fortress. So different fortresses are going to give you different bonuses. And you kind of have to pay attention to that because, like, here you can see, oh, hey, you can get Hector shards, It's just little things like that are, it's relevant over time. And so that's where a lot of that time is spent. That said, I would say about the only thing that you should really know in regards to the actual game that is Whiteout Survival is know that you're not alone in the way that the state starts out. So a lot of the content that you start off with is actually built on this monument. And you'll notice that, like in my case, I can tell you exactly how old the state is. It was founded sometime around October 4th in 2023. So it's been going on for almost 2 years now. And over that period of time, we didn't meet, certain goals, but we did, hit other achievements, and those rewards were then dropped, and eventually, you get to a event where you're at, or, you got fire crystals and all that jazz, right? But the basic gist is that every state is not unique, and that technically there is a running logic for every state, then you're going to unlock things over time. So a lot of people will probably get really caught up in the first three generations, which, when we refer to generations, what we're really talking about is actually the set of heroes that you have access to. The first generation is, well, just that, the very first generation of heroes that you get access to. And then over time, you get the next generation, the third, the fourth, and so on. And so what we often really want to tell most of the newer players that come into the game is that, if you're going to go out and like max out Molly day one, what we tell you almost right away is don't get too carried away with going in here and using your own general mythic shards on someone like Molly. You'll have plenty of time to unlock Molly. You don't need to worry about it. It's one of those things that you'll get her shards without a whole lot of trouble. Now, where you start to get a little bit more, well, why are you going to be playing this game free to play, or are you going to be playing this pay to win? If you're going to play it pay to win, almost everybody will pick up Geronimo and max him out. The reason why is because, well, for one thing, he gets a natural leader bonus, which when maxed out is giving him 15% increases to his lethality and health. Plus, he's also an infantry hero, and generally speaking, whenever you're going against other players in this game, one of the things that a lot of people get caught up in is you have to think in terms of not only the research tree, which is a core stat of what you currently have in attack stats, but you also have something called chief gear in the game, where you have to then unlock a piece of gear, upgrade it all the way, which will then increase certain stats, which normally, is attack and health and lethality and defense for a certain unit type. And so you have to go out and upgrade those. And then they've even got another thing on top of that called charms. And those charms, again, upgrade the stats even more so. And if you think, oh, sure, that sounds like a lot, well, it doesn't stop there. The individual heroes also have their own gear. And these also impact the amount of stats that you can tweak and adjust. And obviously, what we start to sound, it sounds like a pit, like a money pit. And if that's what you're thinking, that's exactly what it is. It's a money pit. You can spend your heart's content trying to upgrade these, and in the shortest period amount of time is going to mean the most amount of money. If you're playing like over time, you can kind of stretch that out, and it's not so like outrageously expensive, but it doesn't change the fact that a lot of people will inevitably want to be the best, and that puts you in a kind of a race for whoever's the best at that point in time. A lot of people get caught up in that, and that usually is a self-fulfilling prophecy for, and that's basically what monetizes the game, more or less. With that said, if you're somebody that's, still open-minded to this game and you're going through, like, the shelters and you're taking care of, like, even the little minions, you might find it funny that after a certain point, you don't actually need to pay attention to their messages. This is just one of those things that when the game starts out, it's nice and it's funny. It's like, hey, I've heard a highly respected survivor is now doing this. And you have two options. 90% of the time, you can kind of just guess, oh, if I say no, he doesn't like it. If I say yes, he likes it. And a number goes up and down, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But if you're like wanting to poke around and get gems and what have you, then, spend some time doing your suggestion box, and you're probably going to have a fair bit of that. Now, one thing I will tell you is anybody or everybody that's starting out, you've got this little production tab. You want to set it to fancy mail almost right away. And then you want to go over into your furnace and make sure you've got the max power turned on. These are like the two things that almost everybody doesn't pay any attention to, and then they're wondering why their survivors are super pissed off. That would be why. Beyond that, though, about the only other thing that I've told people is, run the rotation of basically doing, you have the option of doing double time, which you basically pop that before you run, building upgrades. You can kick off productivity day and then urgent mobilization to get the most amount of resources. You can run festivities if your people are super pissed off for some reason, and comprehensive care is really only helpful if you've got a lot of sick survivors for some reason. Rush job is just going to be handy if you're just wanting to run, an extra resource gain after a while, but to be honest with you, after a certain point, you really should be gathering most of that anyway. Because if you're trying to do all of your resources internally and you're really screwing it up. Like, you're just wasting your time, if you want my 2 cents. There's not a whole lot of point in doing that. I would say do the very bare minimum, because the thing about it is well, yes, you can get a lot of internal resources over a period of time. You're going to find that you're going to gather more, at least in the early game, going around and gathering it than you are to actually go about trying to make it internally. And it's just the way it is. And even after that point, eventually it makes more sense to attack other players, even, really. But that said, with all the other events and everything that goes on in the game, but the only other tip I can really give you that I would say would probably help most people is knowing that if, like, you go into the arena, you don't have to actually watch this battle if you don't want to. You can hit pause and hit retreat. It'll immediately give you an answer of whether you won or lost. You don't actually have to watch this. And a lot of people do get kind of hung up on, like, well, why is it that I won and why is it that I lost? And, it goes back to the mechanics of the game, which is to say that infantry are going to beat the living bejeebus out of lancers. The marksmen are going to beat the living bejeebus out of infantry. And you tend to find that most people that want to, mess up, like, they don't really pay any attention to this, but, like, going infantry on Lancer infantry, for example, I mean, you watch this, but they get a little bonus for hitting Lancers. So if that infantry stack happens to run into infantry, well, it's not going to do as well, but obviously if it hits Lancers, it's just going to melt right through it. Now, the other problem is, you also have, going back to what I was saying earlier, you also have a gear factor. Now, like, here, I don't have very good gear at all. I have like 3 sets of good gear. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because for me, a long time when I started playing this game, it made more sense to actually have 3 very decent sets of gear rather than have 6 sets of decent gear across, 6, and have somewhat okay gear across those 6 pieces of heroes. The problem is that over time, we've acquired something now, and it wasn't this way like a few years ago. We actually have something called the Labyrinth. You'll eventually unlock it, but basically what this is for is so that you can go around and you can acquire glowstone and get this, enhancement experience, and you also get Labyrinth treasures. And you turn around and use this to basically work and upgrade your gear and build up and progress. I mean, that's really about all there is to it. This is just, stuff that when I was starting out, it wasn't prevalent, and it's only become relevant now 2 years later. Now, the only other thing that I would say a lot of people do get kind of hung up on, and I see it from time to time, is when the War Academy shows up, this is when you actually get access to something called Tier 11. Tier 11 troops are obviously incredibly expensive to maintain, acquire, and so on. And so you kind of have to choose between whether or not would you rather upgrade your furnace level, and that's, going to cost you a fair bit either way, right? But the benefits of upgrading the furnace versus actually getting tier 11, usually it's in more favor of upgrading your furnace and upgrading the buildings around you than it is to actually do tier 11. I am of the opinion that the only people that really ought to be considering War Academy are the people that are spending a lot of money. Like, if you're chucking $400 or $500 a week at this, then yeah, go for it. If you're not, I would not recommend doing that. I really don't think you're going to gain anywhere near the entertainment that you think you're going to gain from getting it. It's not going to put you in a better place, per se, because of just how much statistics and benefits that you would need to have to even get there in the first place. Now, the other thing is that in the Hero Hall, a lot of people are kind of curious as to, like, well, should I save these or should I not save these? And the answer to that question is that, like everything, this changes over time. So if you hang on to those hero keys, for that matter, and you don't waste them, eventually, as your state progresses, you'll acquire more and more heroes. And as you get to, like, say, my case, where you're all the way up into 6th, 7th gen, 8th gen heroes, you can turn around and get shards for all these extra heroes. And then what you can do is actually wait until events like, say, Tundra Trading Station comes around, or even, there's plenty of opportunities where you can basically turn around recycling those shards and then turn them around for other items that you would want or need. So you don't really have to be super pushy about it in terms of whatever it is that you're wanting to do at any given time. Now, like the dock, about my only tip with this is, you're really picking up basically the bare minimum you can, and then you go around and you do island prosperity, which is to say that you basically need to go out and give every other person a helping hand. So that way you get that little extra bump. This is one of those things that, a lot of people would probably say, I know, well, what's the point of doing this, right? It's like, why do I care? The only thing that you really gain out of this is you can upgrade the buildings. And as you upgrade those buildings, you're getting core stats, which over time, somebody that has these are going to have more benefit against other players than those that aren't. But really about the only thing that this adds to the game more than anything is the opportunity to basically make your own little island and change and make what you want to do. If you want to make a little city, what have you. It's kind of a cool little cosmetic thing, but it's not much more than that. Beyond that, between the dock and everything else, of course, yes, there is beasts in the game and the beasts themselves and all of the things that go into the pet tab. I mean, really about all you need to know is, yeah, you basically want to upgrade these. And, in priority of what I got, you can already see how I went about it, which is to say I went for, I got building construction speed bonuses, got stamina bonus, got resource bonus, then pet food, which helps you upgrade the actual pets themselves. And then I sort of did these as I went along, and that's really, it's really not that complicated, but that's literally just do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then max them out. The rest of them are all military and variation, so you don't really have to stress too much one way or the other. I would say that when we're talking war, right, and getting into the nitty gritty of like going against other players, right, I would say a lot of people kind of get this mixed up, but they think that what they can do is they can go and solo somebody. You don't really do that in this game. What you do instead is you actually do a large majority of any kind of major conflict is usually done in events. Now, I'm not going to say you can't go around and like individually indiscriminately start hitting players by yourself. And yeah, you can do it, but it's at great expense to yourself, usually, especially in the early game. Like, it's not recommended to go about doing it that way, but I'm not going to say you can't do it. It's just what most people will probably find themselves doing, though, is that, like, if you're going to go against other players, you usually want to be in a collective group of people doing it. If that is to say, so if you're going to go out and say, hey, you're going to go rally this guy, rallies are the way to go about this. Obviously, you want to scout them, check and see if they're online, verify that, they're not going to be a complete hit. And then when you actually go out and say you're going to set a rally and you're going to have everybody join in, you've got the little flag here that's key. The reason why you want to pay attention to that is the little bonus that kind of goes into the whole factor of, not only the special gear that they have for that individual hero, but also like all the stats and all the different benefits. And like anything, I'm not a big fan of like, I need to use this particular combination. Like I need to use 30% this, 50% this, and 40. Even it out when you're attacking, because when you're starting out, you're not going to be able to like individually indiscriminately pick out what their format of troops that are left are. But going back to the logic from earlier, like if they don't have any infantry, then having marksmen in there is not really going to do you any good. Vice versa, if they don't have any lancers, there's not really a whole lot of sense in sending a bunch of infantry, because I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that like the logic behind why you would use a certain unit type is really based on what they counter. And that is to say that infantry are always going to be in the front. Weirdly enough, a lot of people get this kind of mixed up from time to time, but when you ever watch a battle, so if you go over and you can actually sit here and look at it, so like if you're under attack and you get hit for any reason, like here, not that long ago, I got hit and lost 584,000, and you look at it and you go, okay, wow, that's a lot of troops to die, yikes. And you look at all the bonuses and factor. The battle report will tell you 90% of the time why you lost, and it almost always comes down to statistics of whatever your stats were and whatever gear they had, and the rest is all history, right? But the main thing is you see how here, like, there's steel fangs, and based on this, if it's a defender, well, it didn't apply. Now, if it was an attacker, which if we look at like say like this piece here, for example, you'll notice that it increases defender troops. Okay, doesn't help them. Here, defender troops doesn't help them. This one here increases rally troop lethality. Okay, that one does help him. But the irony of a lot of that is that you can see where certain people kind of mess up, but even then, even though they mess up somehow, they don't necessarily lose because of the amount of core stats that they have going into the rally, as well as all the core troops and tiers of troops that they're sending. Now, that's another thing that also goes into that, is how well organized is it? And usually, true power comparison will kind of give you an idea of just like what the percentages of what their combinations I realize are. So, like here, you can see they were a little heavy on infantry. They went 42% or so infantry. They didn't put near as much lancers and marksmen. And part of the reason why I could see a person doing that is the more infantry you have out in the front, the longer you're going to be out in the front. Therefore, you're going to live longer. So if you go by that logic, it's really probably not the worst idea to go into a rally with in mind. And whether or not, so like, for example, if I poke around here and let's say if, I don't know, I've got a bunch of instances where I've been, like I've been hit and somebody completely got shredded. Like this guy here, he basically soloed and he just walked right head first into it. And you look at it and you go, why did he think that was a good idea? And it all has to do with the fact that, some people scout and check and see what they're hitting. And a lot of the time people that don't. And so if you look into the actual details, you can hit power up and that'll give you an idea of where you are amongst all players in your state. It gives you a pretty good idea if you're doing bad or worse, or at least collectively. But I mean, outside of that, really about all this will tell you in a report is you can see what the individual losses are for each person that joins in that rally. And like looking at it earlier, like if we go back to arena, how like I was telling you, like infantry are in the front. A lot of people don't really pay any attention to this, but like when you're going into a actual fight and you poke around and actually see where, you can see where lancers are always in the middle and then the marksmen are in the back. But what ends up usually happening in a rally or even in solos and stuff like that is when you start to run out of infantry, they start to dip into your lancers. But lancers can throw over your infantry and start hitting your marksmen. So what usually ends up happening is like infantry and marksmen will start to lose troops. But when you start losing a lot of infantry, which is around 30 to 40% of all infantry you have in that rally, or that solo for that matter, when you dip into about 30 to 40% of it being dead, does it then start to dip into your lancers? And when that happens and you start losing lancers, then you've did the one thing you shouldn't have done. Because at this point, you've now basically lost most of your infantry line. And so those infantry then will dip into your lancers. And because they get a bonus for killing lancers, you're going to lose a lot of lancers. You're going to inevitably increase the amount of kills that you're going to inflict upon yourself almost tenfold. And this is part of the reason why when you can look at like a lot of these rallies where, somebody came by and they like smacked me and they did really, really like next to no damage. That's what's happened here. It's like if you look at it and you actually pay any attention to the battle report itself, you'll notice that like most of their infantry line had disappeared. And as soon as that happened, so, like the amount of losses that inflicted on their lancers and everything else just kind of expedited itself from there. But like everything, okay, I always point this out, but like one of the things that you can do is you can also use bonuses. And all of these 2-hour bonuses are relatively cheap. They're about 2,000 gems a pop. So you can get away with giving yourself at least a little bit of a bonus if you ever get attacked. And I feel like a lot of people, at least when they're going into an attack of any kind or join a rally, the one thing that you got to pay attention to more than anything is going back to what exactly are their exclusives going to be giving in the rally. And then the other question also becomes, what is the first skill at the top right? Because like here, this is going to give you a 25% increase to damage dealt, which means you're going to be able to do more damage as you're attacking, and so if you're going to contribute that particular stat, that'll get added with anybody that has the flag joining into that rally will then contribute that skill. Now, if you're the rally lead or the rally captain, well, then what matters here is not just this particular skill, but also the other two.
because now these are also being applied into the rally. So you also kind of have to think in terms of whatever it is that, core stat wise is going to be the most efficient as well. Like, say if I was to use Molly, all right, if I go to the bottom right, you'll notice that core stat wise in the rally, she's only contributing 200% Lancer attack. If I were to, I don't know, go up to a like near Gen 3, Gen 4, even like a few generations higher, there's usually a 30 to 40 to 60 and so on of an increase on their actual core stat. So there's a reason why you don't see people sending like Gen 1 when they're fighting in Gen 9. Like, you're losing a substantial amount of stats from the actual core hero. A lot of people mess that up. But, otherwise, I mean, really about all you would have to spend any amount of time doing between all the war and all the other things that I've told you, right? Most of the time, people will go out and they'll set rallies on bullet tears, and you can get a fair bit of loot just by doing this every day. Like, I would say a lot of people don't do it enough as much as they probably should, because you can acquire a lot of metal, gems, and frankly, even shards and speed ups and resources. Like, it's just kind of like one of those things that you should probably make a habit of doing at least once a day, because if you're not doing it, you're just gonna really kind of find yourself wondering why you hadn't been doing that. And like intel missions, I mean, the same thing applies here. Like, you should do your intel missions every day as well, because you're gonna get fire crystals, you're gonna get shards. There's a ton of loot in here that you can get, and it adds up and it builds up relatively quickly. So there's not really any reason not to do it. As far as the shops are concerned, I mean, really about all I would say is you don't really need to do a whole lot of trade resources in here. I mean, you can do a little bit of it, and every once in a while, like there, I can trade, everybody millions of resources for something without ever actually spending gems on it. Mystery badges are kind of where you can kind of get a nice savings on this from time to time. If you're trying to get like everything from hero widgets to stones, you can get pretty good, decent deals in the mystery shop. Arena, I still, pretty strictly speaking, I either pick up mithril inside here, or I pick up custom mythic hero gear chests. Every once in a while, if I'm doing pets, I'll pick up serums. Those are like the only three things that I pick up in Arena. As far as the VIP shop is concerned, about the only thing I would think anybody really spends their time doing is probably picking up EXPs. And then that's not really a whole lot more that I would bother picking up in here. As far as the actual Alliance Championship shop, the three that are sold out, that's what I pick up. As far as Foundry, same thing. I go for enhancement experience. And then in the State of Power, I pick up fire crystals. And every once in a while, I might, if I've got extras, I might try and pick up, say, like the March of the Sunseeker Express, just because it's cool. But otherwise, in the skin shop, I'm still trying to work on getting the Spore Haven, but that'd be like the only other thing. You can grab this guy, which is kind of a cool Mushroom Fairy marching skin. Otherwise, in Canyon Shop, again, I go for enhancement XP. Because if anything, that's really a vast majority of where all your time is going to be spent. And then I don't even touch the gym shop for the most part. Otherwise, do your events. Obviously, save, plan, and rebuild. You always want to basically burn speed ups and such during an event. Like right now, it's Alliance mobilization, so you always want to run refreshes if you can't do them. But you basically want to make a habit of just trying to get points and giving your guild as much rewards as you can possible. And over time, you'll eventually kind of come to thank me for a lot of that. Otherwise, about the only other thing you can do is if you're in your city, you can always go up to the top tab. This will tell you what your internal temp is, in case you're wondering. Otherwise, you can always go up to the bonus overview tab, and this will tell you, all your stats as far as like hero power. It'll tell you what your kills and losses are. It'll also tell you what number of march keys you have, your deployment capacity. It tells you what your core stats are, as well as what the bonuses if you're getting attacked, what your gathering speeds are. And I mean, that's where the vast majority of all that stuff is held and maintained at. Then again, like I was saying earlier, if you ever decide that you're going to go out and attack something, obviously make a habit of burning stamina from time to time, especially when events give you rewards and benefits for it. Really, about the only other thing is, just making sure you do these daily missions. You want to try and get the last daily mission every day if you can, because again, this is how you're going to get some mystery badges, and all that stuff adds up over time. It's just more or less that's really the main gist of that. Otherwise, I would say that's really about everything you need to know. Now, if you're going to go into the pay to win realm, pay to wins will probably pick up things, and it really just depends. I would say, like, how you go about approaching this is really up to you, but I will tell you that, like, most of the money that you will spend, you should almost never spend it in here. I would not bother with regular packs. Donphan is probably worth it, in terms of what you gain in the amount of gems. Daily deals is a no-brainer. And as far as monthly cards are concerned, I would pick up the monthly card, but I don't bother with the other cards. I really don't, and I just don't want to, and I don't think I'll ever change in that realm. I will say, getting via P12, once you get there, you pretty much don't have to do much after that. Like, once you get there, you're pretty much there. Of course, there are certain skins like the unicorn skin. There's different emotes and such that you can get. And of course, if you if you ever get bored and you want to, like, customize or change your city in any major way, I mean, there's different skins in the game. So I can give you kind of an idea of what, like, some of the skins that I have, and I haven't even used. But I've got, like, a whole variety of different skins that I've acquired over the past 2 years. So, like anything, there's always going to be more and more content as the game is progressively getting more and more different. I will tell you, if you're wondering how you get Helios Outpost, you just have to take over the Sunfire Castle, and then you can get Hydro Sea as well. But, like, Forge Town, for example, you get that during or Arena of Stars, you get that from beating everybody in Arena. But, like, a lot of these items you can acquire, for a set amount of money. It's just like anything, it just takes a lot of time. Um, but yeah, other than that, thank you guys for watching, and hopefully that was enough to kind of give you an idea of what Whiteout Survival is all about.